Okay, ich glaube, es funktioniert schon.
Ja, wir sind da.
Okay. Okay, hello and welcome to the Storytelling Essentials. You just heard Evelyn and me talking in German. Maybe it sounds a little bit weird.
Okay, ich glaube, es
I'm
funktioniert
super
schon.
happy
Ja,
to have her here and need to mute the video. So, everyone who don't know Evelyn, she is my mentor, friend, and also a strategic business partner. And I'm happy as heck that she is here today to talk about storytelling in business. And while I will share the video inside my communities, I would love if you can introduce yourself for those who
absolutely.
don't know you.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for the opportunity. So my name is Evelyn Weiss. I have been in marketing for uncomfortably more than a decade. And I have been in the online education space since 2020 as an educator, grew the online business to 6 million in sales. And a lot of what I do is informed by running ads, but also email marketing. And in my ad as well as in my email marketing, I use a lot of storytelling. It's something that I noticed like early on as a talent of Julia's. So I also, pushed her to lean more into this direction, and that's kind of it's a passion of mine. I think she's particularly well at it, and so that's kind of what unites us when it comes to storytelling. We both kind of have a natural tendency to be good at it and to leverage it a lot in our marketing efforts.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's true. You pushed me through, I think, over 4 years into this storytelling niche, and I'm very thankful that you did this. You said that you use storytelling in your marketing and in your email. Would you mind explain me or explain us a little bit more how you, I think some of them know how they use them in email, but you said you use it in marketing. How do you do this?
Mhm. So I think my philosophy to marketing as an expert is that basically you're monetizing your personal growth journey, right? So what that means is you provide value because you have exposed yourself to challenges and experiences that other people have not exposed themselves yet to, or they don't want to expose them. And basically you can process what you have been through and with that save people, time and headache and basically templatize those parts of your journey that ultimately worked out. And so when we're marketing that, talking about our experiences in a genuine way so people can assess the quality of those packages that they buy that can be in different containers is kind of a vital part. So I personally like firmly believe that we should not sell something we've not done. And so naturally, right, we have a suite of offer that's based on our experiences. And my philosophy is to just report what we have done, what we're working on, what we're thinking about it, in a way that's engaging. And that means that we're just telling the story of how did we get here? Why do I offer this? Why do I teach things in this way? Why do they make sense? It's just informing others how we gathered that experience in a way that is educational and entertaining because stories are very educational, right? It's how we've learned for hundreds of years was basically by telling each other stories that had a moral of the story. And so basically almost every piece of copy I produce in one form or the other is reporting from an experience that I had, is weaving in storytelling, a little bit more or a little bit less, just so people understand the context of how did we get here, why do I offer what I have to offer, why do I say what I have to say. So that's kind of how I conceptualize it in marketing. It's really at the core, I would say.
Okay. What you said underlines 100% my approach of not sharing only valuable content or educational content. So my approach is to stop sharing the next 5 tips for a specific topic and more incorporate your learnings. And I would like to know how you combine storytelling and educational content. So do you have any tips to do this?
Yeah, absolutely. So Um, the way I am producing educational content right now is actually that I know the topic of what I want to teach, and then I first record myself talking through everything that I know about this topic, every, experience that I think is relevant. And I basically work with structuring that transcript of just surfacing everything I know about this and all the experience that I have about this, I then structure it into a logical path. And so how that turns out is that the things we need to do and the experience that led to the conclusion that we need to do these things, they kind of naturally combine. And I noticed that this is very effective for my learner as well, because one thing is that people, first off, they need to really understand what they do. When you just said, the 5 tips for X, or said, one problem with that is, and maybe you all know this, like even before AI, if you ever wanted to, break into the online education space, you probably read like a blog post, like how to make money online, right? And you're like, oh, there's this 10-step blog post with these 15 tips. So after I read this blog post, I should have an idea of what I need to be doing. And if you're like me, you probably read dozens of these blog posts just to at the end scratch your head and say, I still don't understand what I need to do. And the same kind of applies for when we're now creating content and we're using ChatGPT as the original source of the content, right? I love to use it for refinement of my like original ideas, but when we use it as the original source, it sounds logical, but I'm still unsure like of what I need to do. And when we're and that's the reason also why people then don't implement, right? They're like, sounds logical, sounds good, but I don't fully understand the nuance of like what action should I be taking. And other than taking action, there's not like nothing will manifest in your life until
Mhm.
you do the thing, right? Until you write the email, and so nothing will happen unless you do things. So you need to clarify like what to do. But I also and that can be born from your story, right? Because you have to be in through the experience to understand the nuance of the steps that you need to take. And then the other thing is people also can't take action if they even have the nuance of what they need to do, right? To the point of click this button, click that button. They also need to have the why, right?
Mm.
So today I trained people on like how to create your angle ads, and where we just validate the messaging and everything else is just very plain from the design. The most questions that I answered around that, because I was very detailed in how are we doing it, was why are we doing it? Why are we, and then you're telling the story of when I did it the other way, this I had introduced additional variables, so I didn't know how to progress, right? And so now they can say, oh, she tried that, it didn't work, and now, I can dare to invest my energy into doing this because from her experience, she learned another way to do this. So it doesn't only enable them to understand exactly how they need to do the what, but also get the why that they need to then have enough justification to invest energy in executing the task.
When I started my online business back in 2020, I was taught that I should share the why and not the how, because people should pay for the how. And now, 5 years later, I think people need to know why. This is so much more important than the how, because the how you can find on Google. So
Mm,
I really think that if you want to learn running ads, writing a blog post, losing weight, whatever topic it is, you can go on YouTube or on Google and you will find a lot of different approaches to do this. But for
mhm.
me, I learned that people purchasing my offers, my courses, my memberships, because they want my personal approach.
Mhm.
And if someone decides that you are the trustworthy person, they have a connection with you. And I think this is for me, the power of storytelling is
Yeah,
people buying from you because they want your unique approach and your
yeah.
way to do this because they feel like you are a person they have a connection with.
That's so true. And I think what stories really beautifully allow us is when we tell a story, we're also revealing where we're shining the light of our attention, right? So the topic that I pick for the story, the words I choose, the tonality, right? The things that I figure are worth highlighting, they all reveal my intentions, my values, the depth of my experience, right? A story in itself is captivating, right? So people actually commit to reading it, but then it's also so revealing. And with that, it allows people to much better judge, are you the person that I want to receive this advice from? So I think that's such a good point that you made. That's very accurate. It allows people to make a more educated buying decision because they can see through the way you share your stories, right? For the way you sharing your experiences, if you're the right guide for them. It even goes deeper, I think, because I'm at the moment, I have a mastermind, right? And do application calls. And I see that a lot of people, for example, feel drawn to me because I don't, for example, want to grow a huge team, right? And I don't want to scale my business in a way where I would create massive overhead and eventually be pushed to a CEO role. So I always talk about kind of being, remaining the artist. I tell from the time when I thought that that's what I need to do and all the mistakes that I made, that has actually connected me so much with my audience. I told them like, you know, I was telling them the stories as I tried and as I was bumping my head and realizing I'm
Mhm.
making a mistake, I just opened up to them. I was like, well, that was dumb. Like that, I didn't say like that was dumb because that's not how I talk to myself about it. And that's not how I would want them to talk to themselves about it. But I was like, I ran into this direction, and here's all the problems that emerge, and here are all the mistakes that I made along the line, and here's what I regret, right? And here's what I will be doing differently. And those emails, they connected me much deeper because people now also that were on the fence, like, do I want to go in this direction, right? Or maybe are in that direction, and for them the same challenges arise. Now they can say, okay, there's somebody like daring to speak out that it's not all, glitz and glam, and she's actually daring to correct the course. So that might be my guide because I also have similar experiences. So I think especially in sharing just very transparently and very insightful, like what's happening, and not being too concerned about how you come across.
Mhm.
That is very, very powerful when it comes to storytelling, right? Many people think like either I have to do like my rags to riches story and I have to be like so poor. That's a lot of people that then get stuck because they do get attention and then they just keep pushing like basically portraying them a little. I don't want to say, victim mentality because I don't think that for various reasons, I don't think it's good to say to something like that. But I think they just get rewarded from the market for always being the one, who struggles. So they keep just sharing these stories. Or the other direction, there's people that just keep sharing the success stories, right? The next like income, etc. And I found my path, like in the middle, is just I report as it's happening from my state, how I'm processing it, in a way that's hopefully constructive. And I found that that is the best and also long-term most sustainable one because it also feels most authentic.
Yeah. There is so much truth in this. So as you said that you share that you changed your path, I felt like many people are so afraid of saying, "Oh, I went through the wrong path. I need to go a few steps back, rethink, and then change a different path." So I did the same with the membership thing. So for a very long time, I ran different memberships, and I never felt like so it's really for me.
Mhm.
But I did it because I thought I had to do this because I thought it might be the only possible way to succeed with my business. And then I finally understand that maybe I'm not the person who wants to have multiple memberships.
Mhm.
So it took me a few weeks and it was a hard way, but the decision comes that I shut down a few memberships, only have one. And I was very afraid of telling this
Mhm.
to my audience, but I only got the most positive replies on my email.
Mhm.
I could imagine people said, "Well, Julia, it's fine. So we are all human." And
Mhm.
since I started sharing also what's not going that well, like I shared a few weeks ago that I took a part-time job to support my business because 2024 wasn't definitely not my year. And I thought, oh, will people see me as an expert? So
Mhm.
when they understand that I wasn't that successful and I need a part-time job, would they still think that I'm a trustworthy person? And I never got that many replies in an email.
Yeah.
I think I got over 30 replies, people saying, "Hey, Julia, really, I also have a part-time job. I also I have a full-time job. I'm doing all to support my business." And it felt like a huge relief to have finally a proof that
Mhm.
if you are so if you are only um, if you're vulnerable and if you're just telling what's going on, this only can support your business.
Yeah. I agree. And I think it's also a change that we're seeing in the market as well, right? So I thought about this recently a lot, and I think it boils down to things that we can respect. And things that we respect is basically when somebody has clear values, when they're acting in integrity with these values, and when they're authentic. And I kind of look at the guru model, which is, I think in 2020 it was just at its height, but it started much earlier. And it's like we created all these marketing mechanisms that are hijacking, respect because,
Mhm.
because of the portraying of the after of the journey, right? Which implies the assumption of the person has been through the journey because they have the material possessions and they have the confidence that you would only gain if you have actually been through the journey. But those are things you can fake, right? And so we and then there were the teaching of how do you present as such, how do you hold yourself as such, how do you
Mhm.
share from the scars, not from the wound, right? And so a generation of online educators was indoctrinated with this idea of you have to be the expert, you have to maintain distance, you cannot let them see, that you're also struggling and also still figuring it out. And while that drives sales for the moment, it just doesn't align with the human experience of we are constantly evolving. The market is constantly evolving. We need to adapt, right? So that the whole, like our whole universe, like the next moment, all atoms have they're changed their position, and it's a constant survival of where we just need to adapt to the new conditions. And when I've now portrayed myself as all knowing and I have figured it out, I'm cornered myself, right? Because now I have made absolute statements about right and wrong methodologies and about the only way to do it. And, so I've been so absolute that, and so confident in my absolute statements that I now can't even get out of this. And this is what we have been taught, right? But it works only for the moment. But now the years go by and things change. And inevitably, either you can start lying to yourself and your audience, but keep hammering things that don't work anymore, or you have to say, things changed. And I'm sorry, this is uncomfortable, but I'll have to adapt. And if you tell the story of what is changing and what is my hypothesis of how things are adapting, you can take people with you, right? And of course, there's resistance to change as well. But I think that's the only honest option you have for yourself and for your audience. And if you never went in such absolutes in your marketing and in the way you perceive yourself, you're having many outs because everything you do is just an experiment. And I think we see like this huge shift from the expert to, especially now with, school is like a huge trend, but I think online learning communities in general and collective learning, just for even if you like completely forget school, which is also basically just piggybacking on this bigger phenomenon of the creator economy, right? So we had the educators, the experts, and then we had the rise of the creators. And with TikTok, we were going into a revolution of relatability, right? So people were seeing massive success, just being super transparent and being super real and almost like outdoing themselves in how much value they can share for free. And that changed the landscape, right? Because now we can literally find everything for free on YouTube. And it's not about you being the like person who has the secret sauce. It's about you being the most valuable contributor to the discussion. You're being an insightful person that others want to be around. So it's instead of thinking I have to be the expert, you would want to say, I have to be somebody who is contributing to the discussion because I am challenging myself to go through the experience and I'm translating it back to others so they can save time. I think
Yeah.
that's kind of the shift that we're seeing. And just honestly telling your story enables you to do all of that, right?
Yeah.
So it solves itself. You don't have to think like, I think when we started this journey, we also had like the knowledge posts, right? And then
Yeah.
it all solved itself when we just started to tell just the story, like of this is what we're doing and this is what's happening and this is how we're making sense of it.
Yeah. I had to learn that storytelling is not only about sharing your journey or what's going on, and there is a relation to your business. I also learned that you can educate your audience, but in a different way by just sharing your learnings. And I think they are so much more valuable than the 5 tips from whatever, because everyone has a different approach of succeeding or of losing weight, building a business, whatever it is. And I think storytelling gives you the opportunity to just share your unique path and gives people the opportunity to check if you are the right person or not. So,
Yeah.
and you talked about TikTok, and before we stepped on the call, I said that I feel like there is a difference about storytelling in social media and email.
Mm-hmm.
And I would love to hear your thoughts because we talked just a few sentences about it, that there is a difference in how we share stories in social media and in emails.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the type of storytelling, so social media, unfortunately, I'd have to say, you have to be attention grabbing, right? So people who master storytelling on social media, often there is a little bit of drama involved, a little bit of over exaggeration, right? Because the platforms often just really demand that. And it can be hard to keep up with that, and it can be hard to stand out with that. Um, and for maybe the more introverted person, this might be challenging to like put themselves out there. For me personally, I know that it would be too much. Also, I think there's a difference when we tell a story in a written format, right? So where we really have the time to reflect and sit down and carefully read the right words. And I think email is just the most beautiful vehicle for this. In 2020, 2021, middle of 2022, still long form Facebook posts were working really well for storytelling as well. Now we can just see that they start to lose their effectiveness, but it's just the overall, the dead internet theory. We just see like Facebook really struggling right now with like users just using the platform as a user still. We still see a lot of people using it, trying to use it for business or still using it for business, but the user experience just has changed. So for me, I'm also withdrawing quite a bit from social media further. Actually, hired somebody to do like a repurposing, but the things that I'm doing personally that I'm focused on because I believe in them. The other thing is like more an experiment, right? And I'm grateful I'm in the position where I can afford somebody to repurpose these things. But the places where I personally dedicate my time is email and then YouTube. That's like where I'm personally dedicating my time. And obviously I'm also active on school because I have my communities there.
Cool. Super. I had a question in mind and forgot it. Oh, yeah. What are your thoughts on vulnerability in your content? So especially men. So this is what I experienced from the workshop on Wednesday. I had a guy sitting there and saying, "Hey, I was taught that how did they say to not wash dirty laundry in public," and he is so afraid of. Or not, he's not afraid. He said he can imagine that anyone is interested in what he's feeling because he was raised with, and we all were raised by, do not talk about your emotions. Your emotions are not important. So, what are your thoughts on sharing really sometimes the hard truth you've learned, feelings? Sometimes I made a post while crying because I was so sad about something. How would you say, or how important would you say is being honest versus being vulnerable in your content creation, emails, whatever?
Mhm. So I love this question, and I think there's a few like things to go into. So I think it needs a preset, and the preset is that even if we, don't put ourselves on the expert pedestal anymore, to be a valuable contributor to the discussion, to be eventually a source of, I'm consuming your experience, right? Don't want to say knowledge, I'm consuming your experience. There still is a certain there's still a certain requirement to be a role model, right? So I don't want to just, not qualify what I'm saying, because what I also have seen during now the 5 years a lot is that there are people who want to sell online education and coaching and self-development that lack foundational emotional regulation, right? And so I think that there's the product that you sell ultimately also is you. And I think we need to there should be a goal to work on your emotional intelligence and maturity and regulation, right? Which I'm also totally on a journey, right? But I think that I just want to qualify that your goal needs to be to become a role model in that, and you need to hold a high standard for that. So I think it's not okay when aspirational coaches trauma dump on their audience, right? And then reinforce it because they get attention. So we've clarified that the type of vulnerability we're now talking about is not that. I do think it's super valuable to be vulnerable. And what does vulnerable mean? It just means that I'm opening myself up for potential criticism. I am being so transparent in how I am perceiving my experience that I'm opening myself up for critique. And again, being able to handle critique is a foundational skill you need if you want to succeed in this space. You will always have people that judge you, right? If you put yourself out there, you will be judged. Your reward is really high. It's a good skill to learn. So there will be people that will read your email and they would judge you. I sent an email where I talk about how I had lice because my son brought them home from kindergarten, right? There are people who roll their eyes at my email and they probably judge me and think like I'm disgusting. But I also had a couple mastermind clients from that very same email. So you have to be okay that you're not everyone's cup of tea. And I think see how the opportunity outweighs the downside if you're comfortable with sharing that. And if you think it adds value. For me personally, that was a really rough week. And the email was called Scratch My Head. And it was about how I talked to my husband about, I need to change my shampoo because I have such a dry scalp and I need to scratch my head. And, a couple days later in kindergarten, I saw the signs that there's lice in the kindergarten. And so I was like, oh, I was already looking for, more expensive shampoo because I thought that the problem that I'm solving is a dry scalp. When the problem that had to solve was the lice, right? And so, and cleaning my whole house and, and all of those things. Um, and the conclusion that I drew is like, we cannot cure our business by looking at the symptoms, right? We really need to understand what the underlying issue is, and we need to, make sure that we're treating the right root cause. And that email really resonated, enough with people to submit an application for my mastermind because they understood it and they could appreciate that I'm just keeping it real with them. Now, for some people, that would have also been a good fit for my mastermind. That was maybe too much information, but then they're not a good fit for my inner circle, right? And so I think that's just how to think about it. You creating a filter, and you just have to be okay with some people judging you and share to the extent that you would want to read from someone else.
Yeah. So I thought that I need to share the latest podcast episode from Mel Robbins. So she talked about the let them theory, and this is basically you are not in control of what people think about you. So use the let them theory. So maybe I linked this below the video. I have a last question. What would you recommend someone who just wanted to write the first storytelling email or wanted to start sharing? Maybe it doesn't have to be a full storytelling email. Maybe your go-to tip for someone who wants to start sharing a bit more personal stuff in their content.
So maybe this is easier if you have a child, but I would say, I would probably sit down. I think it's easy to do this either in the evening or in the morning when you have nothing else. I like to do it with a hot beverage. That's your choice. But I like to sit down and I like to say, what was the lesson of this day, right? So what was the lesson that this day was teaching me, the most meaningful one? And then I think if I had to explain this lesson to Danny, right? How would I tell him that story of how I came to the lesson? And that just naturally lets a plot emerge because I can kind of gauge the level. Danny is my son, he's 5 years old. And so when I think about like how would I teach him like the lesson of this day, I kind of get to these bold ideas of my story. And then I have like the talking point of how I would do it. Again, I'd like to record myself speaking it out because I like to speak write my stories. I find that they're much more impactful when you write them as you would speak them. So I speak it out. It's not perfect, but then I strip the loom transcript and then I, put it into Claude. Claude is my favorite AI for that. I say, hey, this is my day, and I try to conceptualize it as a story. Can you write an email for me? And then it typically gives me a version that I'm like a little bit upset with because I'm like, you didn't get the point. Here's the point. And then I start writing it. Right. And so that kind of works best for me. But really thinking about like first, what's the lesson of, and I also like to do that like when I'm really triggered by something, right? So I say, oh, this hit me hard, right? And it can be in a positive or the negative direction. I could be like, I'm really excited about this, like, woo, this is big. Or I'm like, oh, that you know, that makes me feel bad about myself, or I feel like I did something wrong there, or still. Then I'm like, okay, what's like, what type of stuff is that hitting? Like, there's typically something within me that reacts strongly. And then there's the learning surfacing. So I try to kind of start from the moral of the story, if that makes sense, and reverse engineer it back. But everybody has their own way, and you really have to do practice more to find your own path. And it's great if you can work with frameworks, right? So, for example, you have your hero and helper story, right? So I think we're both good writers because we have been good readers and have been reading a lot since we were bookworms. And then when you consume a lot, your brain starts to pick up. Your brain loves patterns, right? And it starts to pick up patterns. And when you have story formulas, when you have templates, that's a really good, beautiful starting point because you can see, okay, how does my experience fit into that structure, right? And that's a really, really good starting point. So consuming that, working with templates, and then just really practicing until you start to enjoy it.
Yeah, totally. So this reminds me on that you made me your source of stories a lot. And most of the times it was like we jumped off a call and a few minutes later, 30 minutes later, you got an email or a post. And then I thought, this is me. And I used this concept as a template in my storyteller storyboard system, and I called it sharing wisdom without hurting people. Because every time I knew 100% you're talking about me, and you never hurt me, and I never felt like, ooh, she's using me as a source. It was like, okay, she wants to share something, but she don't want to hurt me. And so this reminded me on how I came to the sharing wisdom template and
Oh,
my
I need to check that out. Very often, like my client interactions, kind of they surface that, right? So, um, and often they also surface something about myself, right? Where I maybe go out and I'm like actually the person who I'm writing the email for, just to be reminded of how I need to hold myself differently. So, it can go both ways, I think. Sometimes in a client conversation, your client can learn from you, and sometimes you can learn from the client, and sometimes both happens at the same time.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being here with me. I want to love to gift your community as well with the video. So I already linked
Awesome.
your community. And yeah, thank you so much. And
Thank you.
I hope that this was helpful for you all. And see you um, maybe inside the course or inside the community.
Yeah,
Bye.
I quickly want to kind of give like a last call to
Okay.
action. I think like valuable skills, right? So when you think about learning skills that stack in value, storytelling is one that every single one of my business heroes has mastered. And I think it's one of the most valuable skills to incorporate into your stack. So I know I wouldn't be where I am in my business if I wasn't good at that and if I wouldn't cultivate it. So I think if you're kind of on the fence about it, this is a really, really valuable skill to have. That's just what I wanted to say.
Okay. Thank you. Better
And
last words
then
than
Julia is a brilliant teacher and she cares a lot. So
thank you.
that's also what I want to say.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.